Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode. This is your host, David Kim. Hi, Har. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, David. Nice to be here.
Yeah, you worked in the Myanmar very long time, and beside other frontier emerging markets. So to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your journey to the Myanmar?
Sure. I'll try and keep it fast.
Okay.
I'm Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
I spent roughly 10 years working for the World Bank in Africa, primarily, but also in Washington. And then I ended up in Hong Kong with a part of the World Bank called MIGA that does political risk.
Yeah.
And after working with MIGA, I ran into Melvin Pun, whose family owns one of the larger conglomerates in Myanmar, and they invited me to Myanmar, and through a series of chances, you might say, I ended up as the CEO of Yoma Bank, where I was the CEO for 7 years. Mm-hmm. So in a nutshell, that's the story. That's how I ended up in Myanmar.
Well, I understand you helped to establish the Wave Money, right? Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about the Wave Money? Or what problem is the company solving, and what are the key features or services, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. Yeah. Look, we co-founded, while I was the CEO of Yoma Bank, we co-founded Wave Money with Telenor, which is Norway's telco, which had just been established in Myanmar at the time. And Wave Money is effectively a domestic payments, over-the-counter payments company. That's its DNA.
So, using the phone.
Correct. Using the phone, although agents are very important. So a phone is important, and that's what the arrival of the telcos enabled mobile money, which is what Wave is. Nevertheless, we set up a network of agents. And at its peak, we had about 65,000 agents. And this allows people to go in with cash, give it to the agent, who then puts it on their phone, or who gives them a code, and then they can transfer it around the country. So it's really a payments network, purely domestic for the people. And just to give you a sense, our average transaction size varies, but typically it's between $50 and $70. So low value payments, low value domestic payments.
Mm. Hearing from you, it sounds like it is not the P2P payment solution. Individuals still need to work with an agent. Is it correct?
Well, you need to top up, right? So this was always the challenge in Myanmar. The connectivity between banks, there was no digital money until the last maybe 2 years. So things we take for granted about having money, credit cards,
yep.
Digital money, right? If you don't have any money in your pocket in the West, or most countries, in fact, not just the West, it's not a problem. You pull out a card. In Myanmar, at the time, if you didn't have money in your pocket, you had a problem. So they were using informal payment networks, typically called hundi in Myanmar, where you would give your money to a bus driver or someone else, and through a series of handoffs, the money would end up at its destination. Sometimes the fees were a little bit higher. Sometimes the money could get stolen. So we were solving a problem that was significant. And given the growth of the business, you could see just how important Wave was as a solution for people. And yes, it is P2P.
But agent is helping to top up the money at the mobile phone. Is there
until we get that connectivity and that digital money. So in the last kind of call it year and a half, we had connectivity between banks and Wave. So you could move money, for example, from Yoma Bank to your Wave wallet, and then from your Wave wallet to another wallet. And in that respect, then it became a bit more, I would say, sort of standard. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. I saw your profile, and it looks like you're a very active angel investor as well, right? You invest in many companies.
Yeah, since leaving Yoma Bank, myself and my wife, we believe in, I guess many of our investments have an impact element to them, not all of them, but we've made a number of angel kind of pre-Series A investments to help founders get off the ground in India, in Singapore, in Myanmar. Yeah.
It seems like you are the co-founded startup as well, and then are you active management member in for startup?
I devote a significant amount of my time, yes, but I'm not in the management. No, I'm a founder and director of
Okay.
Lucy. Yeah, Lucy is
Okay.
a bank that we're founding in Singapore to serve women.
Women. Why not men? Why only women?
Well, it's interesting. After being in a bank for 7 years, you realize that the way that banks are designed is often, not always, but often by men. The terminology,
Yes.
the way they're designed,
Yeah, true.
and they're not very friendly. They're not very friendly, period. They're not very friendly for men or women.
Yeah.
But the language, it's sort of not the user journey, the customer journey is not designed for women. So we decided to be something that serves at least 50% of the population. And the foundations of banks are all men. That's changing now over the last, say, 10 or 20 years. But the origins of banks and the language, the terminology, it's all designed by men. Most women, some women, many women, don't really want to be involved with banks for that reason. They use them as little as possible. They use them when they have to, but that's it. And we thought there was a huge opportunity there. So we've decided to found a bank, which is called Lucy, that that will serve women in a better way.
Very interesting idea. So did it already start the banking operation, Lucy?
We are finalizing the development of our app, which should come. So we should be able to launch in the coming months.
So the online digital bank.
Yeah, it's an online digital platform, and we're in the process of getting the necessary licenses. And our shall we say launch case is to serve the helper community in Singapore, right?
Oh, that's even more interesting idea. Yeah, sounds very interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking for the just operation and business introduction of Lucy soon. And you spent a lot of time in the emerging and frontier market, right? Including Myanmar, India, some other markets. So in your opinion, what is the biggest challenge in running a startup business in frontier market like Myanmar? And in terms of complexity of issues and challenges versus great long-term potential. Everybody talk about the long-term potential of the emerging and frontier market, right? But it seems like a foreign investor are not really good at capitalizing on that growth potential in the emerging and frontier market, although they always talk about, right?
Yeah. Just to clarify, I haven't spent any time in India, although I am investing in India. I've spent more time in Africa. I've spent some time in Mauritius and Madagascar. Yeah, look, I mean, I think, first of all, I would say emerging and frontier markets are somewhat different. Frontier are that much harder.
Yes.
I mean, to answer your question, I would say the time frames involved with frontier markets are much longer. You need to commit to a 10 to 15 year, investment cycle, and they can be destabilized, shall we say, if you look at the situation the unfortunate situation in Myanmar right now is a great example, right? Where, the macro politics have really knocked the country off course. And what that means is that if you're not local, right, if you're not from the country, these things are very difficult to navigate. Even if you are local, they're extremely difficult to navigate. But the instinct for foreigners is to leave, right? They get nervous, they get scared, you leave. Equally, navigating the local language, the local culture, all of these things really matter. So I guess the point is that you need to enjoy, you need to like being in the marketplace, and you need to stay with it. And I think if you're going to do a startup in some of these countries or invest, you really need to be committed.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Need to grow together with the local economy instead of quickly monetizing over a short time, right?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if I reflect on the decisions that we were making in Myanmar versus what perhaps you were doing in other markets, in many markets you're trying to improve sales or improve margins by percentage points, right? Whereas or maybe a half a percentage point, 20 basis points, small changes because the business was already founded. In Myanmar, we were making decisions that would move the business by leaps and bounds. We make the wrong decision, it could go bust. And if you make the right decision, it's gonna triple or quintuple the growth. And so I think this type of volatility is something that you need to be comfortable with.
Yes, yeah. Need patience to invest and grow the business and frontier market, I think.
Patience and nerve. Yeah.
Yes. And tolerance level, right? Good tolerance. So because working in the developed the large economy is everything is well organized, but then it's a business model really focus on the one problem, provide one solution. But launching a business and growing the business in frontier market, you have to, build everything from the scratch and then grow over a long time, right?
You're right, and the services that you would expect to be available aren't. For example, power.
Right.
There were many people that would come to Myanmar in the early days, call it 2013, 14, and just expect, which is normal, expect there to be public services, and often they're not. You need a generator,
right,
because power goes down, and you need a variety of things that simply don't exist, and I think that can be uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah, I heard about a lot of a similar story. ODA organization contribute billions of dollars into the frontier market for a single project, but they provide money, build a building, but they don't have water, they don't have electricity. So at the end of the day, they waste the money and they're giving up, right? The project. So entrepreneurs should coordinate with a lot of different parties to solve the problem, build the infrastructure from the beginning. I think that's something necessary for the frontier market. Yeah.
Well, that's right. And I think a lot of that has to do with listening. In truth, I think there's an instinct coming in from a foreign market into domestic market thinking you know best.
Yeah.
Right? There's this sort of cultural superiority that exists. You go in, you think, oh, I've been hired here, or I'm here because I'm here to help, but I'm here. And the truth of the matter is actually the folk on the ground know a lot better, more than you do. And if you take the time to listen and respect what they're saying, often you can avoid some of those mistakes.
That is great advice, I think. Great advice. Yeah. Listen to the local, right? The local knows the local better than us about the consumer, about the market, how they work and the culture, right? Yeah.
And again, coming back to the question of banking, that I found that to be so typical, where bankers are not known for their humility anywhere. And then if you bring a foreign banker who has 40, 50 years of banking experience into a developing market, they come in and they try and replicate everything that they had when they worked for, I don't know, name one of 15 large banks. And in truth, it just doesn't work. It can be very, after 2 or 3 years, everyone realizes that this is just not working out, because that's not what the market needs. The people aren't capable of delivering those services. It's sort of the wrong framework for that marketplace.
What is the next step for you and then your professional entrepreneur journey in the emerging market or the Myanmar?
Well, look, I continue to chair the board of Wave Money. I have for the past 2 years. And over the last 6 months even longer, since COVID and then the coup, it's become challenging. But the revenue model and the business model of Wave is extremely robust. And it has proven to be very resilient in the face of, really difficult circumstances. As I said, a pandemic wrapped in it, now a coup. You couldn't imagine harder circumstances. And so the business is doing very well, and so that should continue for the foreseeable future. I am also a partner in a Burmese private equity fund called Delta Capital Partners, which is invested in Myanmar and will continue to do so, I believe, in the future. I'll continue to manage the private investments that I've made, and I'm also spending more time advising and discussing with startups in other frontier markets, in Africa, and other places where we can take the lessons from Myanmar and apply them to these markets, which have some similar attributes. They're not the same, but they have some qualities that are the same.
Yeah, I can feel that you have a lot of experience launching and building and growing the business in the frontier market. So your experience is very relevant and then very helpful to the entrepreneur or the foreign investor who want to launch or to grow business in frontier market, right?
Well, it comes back to something you said earlier. What I find fascinating is that you have a number of foreigners that have the appetite and interest in investing in frontier markets, and you often have entrepreneurs that are familiar with those markets, but connecting the two, having them understand each other, is extremely challenging. Even
I agree.
they get them to invest, the foreigners are frustrated because everything takes too long and they don't understand why it's so complicated. And the locals frustrated because these foreigners are putting all this pressure on them to do things that aren't possible because they're in a frontier market. And I find it fascinating. You get a lot of friction. So I feel like I've been in a number of situations where I can help to bridge that gap and help them understand each other. I am a foreigner. I'm from Canada. We're not a frontier market. But at the same time, I've spent enough time that I can help to sort of translate and help the two sides to understand each other a bit better.
Yes, because foreign investors, mostly they are large company, large organization. Then they have a well-defined process. I mean, they run into their home market. But when they move to frontier market, they need to modify it. I mean, they need to revise it to fit the local market, right? But they don't do that, right? So they try to run the same process and same business model in frontier market. That's probably beginning of the problem, I think.
You're right. They don't modify their processes. And equally, the timeframes where they apply timeframes from their home markets to the emerging market. So then after 6 months, they say, why haven't we done this yet?
Right.
And there's some explanation. And then, but the inference is that somehow the people on the ground are lazy, incompetent, I don't know, whatever the problem is. And it can really lead to a lot of tension. So if somebody says to you, I was very lucky in Myanmar. I worked for a local group. And so my chairman and my shareholders really understood what was happening. They were Myanmar, they're Burmese, so they understand the challenges, right? So I never really had that issue. But talking to people sitting in, I don't know, the US or it doesn't matter, Singapore, people will be like, what are you doing? Are you asleep? Or are you not doing anything? And it's so difficult to explain that no, you're working 5 times as hard to get half the result. That's right. Literally what's happening. You're working 5 times harder to get half the result. But to get people to build that trust and to build that understanding takes quite a lot.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I mean, they need to understand how the ecosystem evolve and grow over a long time, not for 1 or 2 years, right? And then it's even about the China. I still remember, like when we set up I work for the Korean government bank. We set up the joint finance company, local banks and local partner, and we don't have a patience. So after a few years, we exited it. We sold the share. And then what happened? It became the biggest finance leasing company in China now in 25 years. It's listed, owned by private equity. Multi-billion-dollar business now. But we exited at those times. So we don't have a patience. Yeah.
That's it. It is. It's patience and commitment.
Commitment, yes. They slowly evolve. It's a matter of time, right? And we observed in the Southeast Asia, most of Asian ASEAN emerging market, 20 years ago, they were tiny economy. But over a long time, they grow in the same pattern, right? Every year, same as China. So they need to have the long-term commitment, as you mentioned, and the patience, and that fit the ecosystem of emerging market, frontier market, not that of the America or Europe, right?
No, you're right. And what that brings us to, which is another feature of ASEAN and across Asia, is family-owned businesses. Many of the most successful groups, not all, but many, are not listed. They're family-owned. And as you say, that means that they're intergenerational. So the commitment is they're long time frames. So they were founded by someone and then passed to a son or a daughter and then passed on and on. And it's the 4th or 5th generation. So it's that level of commitment to continue that business, not run it by quarter, but run it by generation. And that's a very different way of having things work.
Yeah, this is a very interesting conversation. Probably advice to share with the international investors who are interested in frontier market. Maybe I'll give them advice. You may change checklist, criteria on your checklist first, and then come over to the frontier market. Otherwise, ticking the box and the same checklist, it doesn't work, right?
Or don't come. I mean,
Don't
without
come,
being
yeah.
rude, I mean, you have two choices. The market is not going to change, but
Right.
but the number of you have these fascinating conversations with your peers on the ground,
Mhm.
and the amount of frustration, because I sympathize with them because they were getting so much pressure from their headquarters, so much pressure to do this or do that, and they were there, and there was a lot of pressure to perform, and they were so frustrated with the situation on the ground. But it's because there's not a common understanding of what can be achieved, and
Right.
it becomes very, very awkward. So there has to be some common understanding of and a reasonable goal.
Yes, I agree. Totally agree. Okay, my last question is, who is the nicest person you have ever met in your life, and why?
The nicest person. Wow.
Yeah, to you.
Yeah, right. Fair
I think in this question, probably I intend to ask, who gave you unexpected help and support?
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, because we are the all self-centered human being, right? We are
Yeah.
self-centered. So someone who gave you unexpected help at a difficult time.
Well, I've had many. I've had so many people help me in my career. I at various junctures.
Yeah, very lucky.
But yeah. Well, you need to be, right, and you need to
Yes,
give.
yeah.
You need to give it back.
Give
I
back,
think there's
yes, I
a bit of
agree.
karma in that, right?
Right. Then it's
in
cultivate the good faith, right? Cultivate good.
And in some way, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing now, helping entrepreneurs and do others, because yes, I'm investing, I expect a return, but at the same time, you're trying to sort of give a little bit back of the luck that I've had. I mean, I would say if you ask me, I think the single biggest, if you like, turning point in my career, an opportunity that I was given, that was to become the CEO of the bank. When Serge Pun made me the CEO of Yoma Bank, I had no experience in banking. I was 35 years old. Right. That was a huge gift to me, an opportunity. I made it work.
Yeah. Yes.
But just be given that opportunity. Now, I wouldn't say Serge is a very nice guy.
Trust,
actually.
Right? He gave you trust.
Yeah. He gave me trust, but he took a, if you like, a bet on me, and he gave me the opportunity, and then I ran with it, and I worked myself into it. But I would, so I know perhaps that's not exactly the question, but I would say if I was given, that was the single biggest opportunity that changed my career path. So I think that's a good answer. Serge the nicest person I've ever met, but
that's a good answer.
I'm certainly grateful for the opportunity he gave me.
Right. Yeah, at the right timing and right place, right? You met with the right person. Yeah.
As they say, it's a luck. You make your luck, right? I took some risk. I moved with my wife, and I had 2 young kids, and I had a 3rd kid in Myanmar, and it was a lot of challenges. But I put myself in that situation. We moved into Myanmar in 2012, so it was right at the beginning of a cycle. And now I look at it, what with the coup, and I realize how lucky we were to have been there for those years of prosperity. Because in truth, with the coup, it looks like they're going to go through a few years of difficulty. And had I moved to Myanmar now or a year ago, I would be in a very different situation. So to your point, luck has a lot to do with it. Okay, I finished all the questions. So thank you so much for taking time to sharing your interesting experience and then professional journey with my audience on the podcast. My pleasure, David. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, share with a friend, and drop me a review. Goodbye.